Yeah, welcome. Today I'm presenting you my thesis project, metric-based analysis of blockchain protocol governance. A few words to myself. So I'm studying here at UCL. I'm doing the Financial Technology Masters. I grew up in Germany. My background is in information systems, and my interests are about digital wealth management and decentralized finance. And this is also the reason why I chose this project in the end. So let's start with a short introduction. So with the emergence of Ethereum and the smart contracts-based infrastructure, a new industry kind of emerged called decentralized finance. And decentralized finance wants to create an open, permissionless financial system. And this is kind of a paradigm shift in financial services. We have projects like Aave, which do peer-to-peer lending, or Uniswap, which is a decentralized exchange. So in fact, they're recreating the services from the traditional industries in decentralized finance. And this sector is rapidly growing. And one key aspect of DeFi projects are governance tokens. So every DeFi protocol, such as Uniswap or Aave, they issue governance tokens. And those tokens represent voting power in the protocol's decision-making. So you can kind of compare it a little bit to shares of a traditional corporation, which also allow you to vote on governance decisions, give you voting power. And those governance tokens enable in the end a community-driven decision-making of those protocols. Those governance tokens, the token holders, they can create and propose proposals, and those proposals typically cover such as protocol upgrades or fees, fee changes, or where to allocate capital. And with those proposals, you can also upgrade your protocol with new features, extend the code base, etc. And this voting often occurs through voting platforms such as Snapshot. However, in this whole governance realm, there is a big research gap. There is a lack of comprehensive quantitative analysis of governance, and thus there is a need for standardized metrics to evaluate how is it going in the DeFi ecosystem, how's the governance evolving, and is it effective? Thus, my research question guiding me through my thesis is: what insights do quantitative measures provide about the governance structures of DeFi protocols? I've conducted an extensive literature review. There is some literature. Some early studies focus primarily on network decentralization and mining power distribution, focusing on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Then there's some studies looking at the Bitcoin and Ethereum from an asset perspective. There's some static analysis of decentralization of governance tokens, looking at the token distribution. In all of those studies, they mainly focus on a few metrics, namely the Gini coefficient, the HHI index, the Nakamoto coefficient, and the Shannon entropy. Then there's some limited studies on the governance participation, mainly looking at the participation rates. Do people really participate in voting on proposals? Moreover, there's transparency is another crucial rubric that is identified as critical for the success of DeFi. However, there are not really any standardized metrics for assessing the transparency in governance tokens. So how did I approach this research questions? Primarily, I decided to focus on 6 different DeFi protocols of varying size, namely Uniswap, Aave, Yearn Finance, Balancer, Index Cooperative, and Spectra. You can see the market capitalization ranges from 6.7 billion to 9 million. So in my analysis, I have a wide spectrum of different sizes of protocols, and the time frame was chosen to be from January 2022 to June 24. So I developed 3 pillars in the end, focusing on decentralization, participation, and transparency. Based on my literature review, I came upon those metrics. Within decentralization, I first analyzed the wealth distribution, namely with the Gini coefficient and tile index, then focused on the token holder diversity, evaluating Shannon entropy and unique holders, then on the concentration of control with the Hirschman index and the Nakamoto coefficient. Then I also looked at the participation of governance proposals, first looking at the activity, how many proposals are there, and then looking at the participation, specifically at the participation rate and at the voter turnout rate. And lastly, the transparency rubric. I focus on assessing the governance documentation, how good it is, then the proposal and voting transparency, do the protocols do any financial reporting, and last but not least, looking at the audit and security transparency. My data sources, my data comes from a variety of sources, primarily from the BitQuery API, where I fetched the token holder data. So basically for Uniswap, every wallet address that owns the token Uniswap over the time frame. I then have used the Snapshot API. Snapshot is a popular governance voting platform, and there I retrieved the proposal details and the voting details, meaning what in the end which wallets voted for the specific proposals. And then I utilized a big range of documentation, from official websites to documentation, governance forums, Gitbook, etc., to assess the transparency metrics. One crucial step in my methodology is that in order to get an accurate picture of token holder concentration, of the distribution of tokens, we need to filter out exchange and contract token holders, meaning exchanges like Coinbase, they usually have the tokens sourced in one wallet address, as well as there are many time lock contracts that are usually then part of the team or other entities that need to be counted out in order to assess an accurate picture of the actual individual holders, which is important in order to assess the concentration of control, for example. Now, I will show you some highlights of my results. So first of all, here we can have a look at the wealth distribution of those 6 protocols, namely the Gini coefficient. As we can see, it's tremendously high. So we have values ranging from 0.9 to almost 1, which is perfect inequality. So there is a very high level of wealth concentration across all tokens, some more volatile than others. However, this wealth concentration is also very persistent over time. So it's not really improving. Maybe Index Cooperative is improving a little bit over time. However, it's pretty significant. Then when we look, for example, at the token holder diversity, we can see a similar picture. Here the Shannon entropy, for example, it isn't, yeah, maybe improving a little bit over time, but mainly very persistent in this case, low values. When we look at the concentration of control, so we're still inside the decentralization metrics. Here, for example, we can see some improvements. It seems that the larger protocols generally have a better or a smaller concentration, a lower concentration. And Aave, for example, is improving quite significantly over the span of 2.5 years. Whereas, yeah, Yearn and Balancer are remaining relatively persistent, but we can still see that this is a really high concentration of power. Because, for example, for yeah, Balancer and Yearn Finance at the end of the time period, still 15 wallet address control more than 50% of the tokens, which is quite significant. Yeah, not that I know of so far. I haven't looked at it specifically, but generally we can see there's an upward trend in Aave. But I cannot explicitly explain the single spike here. But yeah, the Aave and Uniswap are generally, yeah, improving, while the smaller protocols are not really improving, especially Balancer and Yearn. Yeah. Exactly. As said before, I try to choose tokens that have a varying size of market capitalization. So it ranges from Uniswap being a large cap at a market capitalization of 6.5 billion to smaller protocols, because I wanted to assess the impact of the protocol size as well, if there's any interesting dynamic. And as we can see, it seems that the bigger protocols here are improving the concentration metrics better than the smaller protocols. So this, yeah, the smaller protocols are way more centralized in the aspect of asset concentration. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's not too much simple for the need not.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, now let's have a quick look at participation. So first of all, we can see that the number of cumulative proposals, Unis Index Cooperative has by far the largest number of proposals, followed by Balancer and Aave. Uniswap only accounts to 180 proposals over the time frame. And keeping that in mind, We can assess the participation rate here. So yeah, in that chart, each dot represents a proposal's participation rate. Participation rate meaning the amount of tokens that were executed to vote on a proposal over the circulating supply in the end. And you also can see the moving average here. So what generally is true for all protocols is that the participation rate is tremendously low. Here for Aave, we can see that in the beginning, in August 2022, they are at approximately 1% participation, which is not a lot, and then increasing over time to about 4%. Yeah, just for a comparison, for US corporations, the participation rate in shareholder governance is usually about 70%. So this is quite significant. And on the other hand, the voter turnout rate is decreasing over time, meaning less people are voting in relation to the total token holders. Yeah, here we can see that roughly 3% of all individuals voted in the beginning. In the end, it decreased to lower than 1%. And this is seen over yeah, a range of tokens. Just to show you another example, Balancer, for example, here we have a bit higher of a participation, reaching up to 10%, but still very low yeah, voter turnout rates. Lastly, coming to the transparency scores. The dots are basically individual. Here, for example, for the participation rate, the dot is one proposal's participation rate.
And then
Is a moving average. What do you mean?
moving average, averaging the type.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's echo. Okay, so moving average is average across the time, but don't you need to find out the for each day, don't you need a number? Because for each day you have multiple data points representing different protocols, no? How I didn't quite understand how it's calculated.
So basically for each proposal, there's a participation rate.
Yeah.
And this is represented by those dots. Meaning,
Yes.
you can see a dot here at 10% on the time x-axis, meaning that this proposal had a participation rate of 10% of all tokens that are out. And the moving average is calculated on a 180-day basis.
For one protocol or for all the protocols? Sorry, for one proposal or for all the proposals?
Yeah, like the 100-day average.
But how do you calculate each day?
Of all proposals.
How do you calculate the participation rate of all the proposals? You need to. So if I participate in two proposals, you make sure you don't double count.
Sorry.
How do you so okay, so you have a 180-day moving average, right? So you have one value for each day, and then you average out 180 values. Is that correct? Do you have one value each day? So how do you calculate that one value? Because for each day you have multiple dots representing different proposals.
I assume so, yeah.
So what's that daily value calculate? How is that calculated?
I think the average
the average participation rate of each of different proposals?
I would need to recall and look at my code, but yeah, I think so.
Okay. I think this is probably yeah, it's probably okay. It's probably a quick and dirty way to do it. But if you want to do it more on the aggregate level, you need to look at probably the addresses participating in different protocols because so just give you example if sorry, different proposals. Just give you an example. If you have two proposals, right? And then you have 50% of the 50% participation rate of one proposal, and then 50%, the rest, just to give you an extreme scenario, the rest will participate in another proposal, right? On average, you still get 50%, right? But as a matter of fact, everybody participated. It's just some participated in one proposal, some participated in another proposal. You see what I mean? So it depends on how you compute this, you get different results. I think either would be you can reason or either would be sensible. You just need to specify in your dissertation how you actually did it.
Okay, yeah. I will look into it. Thank you. Yeah, and lastly, the transparency scores. So for the transparency scores, I developed a clear scoring mechanism and developed subcategories. Generally, you can see the larger protocols score better on transparency. There's a lot of areas for improvement, especially financial reporting, which only Uniswap does regularly. So summing up, my results show that there's a high wealth concentration, and the wealth concentration is also very persistent, with high Gini coefficients and other metrics across all analyzed protocols. Yeah, with minimal improvement over time. Then there's low governance participation. The rates are often below 5% across all protocols. There's a variability in token holder diversity, so larger projects generally show higher token holder diversity. There's also a divergence in the participation metrics, and there are significant transparency gaps in the end. And the implications from that are that there are significant centralization risks. There's persistent concentration of the wealth poses risks to the system itself. There's a trend of increasing token participation, governance participation, with declining voter turnout, most likely through delegation. And this evolution can generally be seen as positive as long as the overall participation is increasing, because there's a definite need for the participation to increase, or for participation incentives. There's need for mechanisms that encourage both delegation and direct engagement in the protocols. Moreover, there is a protocol maturity impact. Seemingly, more established protocols tend to show better governance structures across all metrics. And last but not least, the transparency can be a differentiator, especially the financial reporting should be improved among the protocols. And that's about it. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.